Happy holidays, the good old Christmas tree. How is it going, people? My name is Mitchell. It is snowing pretty good out today, so I figured that'd be a perfect time to take the old Disco out for some off-roading. I'm sure you saw when I started it up the amount of lights that this thing has on the dash. Pretty much any Discovery 2 is going to have these three lights right here. They call those the three amigos. That's an ABS related thing. This one is actually related to the wheel speed sensor. And then check engine light, who knows, brake lights for this guy here. No clue why that's on. Battery lights probably because it needs charged up, and the airbag light's a pretty new one. Speedometer also doesn't work, but the thing is, this thing will start and it will run every single time no matter what. And I don't think that's something you can say with a lot of other trucks like this. Something like a Land Rover you'd think is so obscure that they'll break all the time, and well, they do, but the thing is, whenever they break, somehow it just keeps on running and driving. Inside, it's a pretty simple utilitarian package. You have rubber covering everything, thick leather seats, everything else is plastic, all this, which makes it really easy to wipe down. It doesn't even look that bad, but it works really well for the application. Now, one of my favorite things about these Discoveries is the amazing view you get out of them. You sit really, really high. I'm 6'1"-ish, and I have probably 2-3 inches of headroom, but the good thing is the seat goes up and down quite a lot. So no matter how tall you are, you can get your head in this position that the camera is facing here, which means you can see the whole hood no matter how tall you are. Then you don't have very big A-pillars. You can see they're very, very small. And if I turn around, there is a lot of glass. The windows are extremely tall. You have these safari windows, and then you have a really, really big piece of glass in the back, which makes visibility just amazing. Another great thing about these, especially for off-roading, is the door panel is maybe 2-3 inches wide. It's not the greatest thing if you're looking for crash tests, but if you're an off-roader, all you have to do is peek your head over a little bit and you can see where the wheel is, which makes it really, really easy to place your car when you're off-roading. Unfortunately, this isn't the happiest looking Discovery. It is pretty disgusting, but that's basically just because I use it for towing, off-roading, and then the rest of the time it just lives its life sitting here in this spot. Taking a look at this motor, it looks maybe a little bit complicated, but it's really not. If I put the camera right here or here, you can notice a good bit of light coming through, which is the ground. So if you move a couple of these things out of the way, you have insane access to get up under the engine. I can even see the oil pan from this top right here. Insane access compared to modern vehicles. There are some hoses and stuff, but these are just throttle cables, and then you have a couple coolant lines and a couple air lines, and that's about it. These are really, really simple and easy to work on. They're even a lot easier in the Discovery 1, which doesn't have this larger intake on it. It just has a little top hat, and you can see pretty much everything you need to. And that is because these engines are derived from a 1960s pushrod Buick V8 engine. That's a pretty low compression engine. I think it's about 9.3 to 1, which means there's not a lot of power, but there is a lot of torque, and it really doesn't stress itself out doing really anything. The funny thing about this particular Discovery is that as time's gone on, I have become less and less careful about maintenance. I used to take religiously good care of this thing, but in the past probably 2 years or so, I have almost done nothing, down to not even touching the oil, coolant, anything like that. It just gets hopped in and ripped on through these trails and stuff around here and towing heavy loads and all that kind of stuff. And it used to break all the time back then when I used to take good care of it, but since I've started to literally do nothing as far as maintenance, it has been rock solid. It's like the car almost prefers not to be taken care of. Now, over the few years that I've owned this thing, it has been absolutely tough. I mean, this thing is rock solid. It's had so many issues, but it's never left me down, never left me stranded. I'm gonna run through a couple of those issues, things you might expect to see if you own one of these things, but also probably why it shouldn't really scare you, because a lot of them are really easy fixes and it's not going to be the end of the world. The only time this car has ever left me stranded was actually delivery day that I got it a few years ago. It came off the trailer, it started perfectly fine, and then I kind of left it for a couple hours, and when I came back I cranked it and nothing happened. So that was a good first start, but Fortunately, that was the worst that will ever be, because that's the only time it's ever left me stranded. It actually ended up being the crank sensor down here on the right side of the motor, but it's really easy to get to up from underneath. So a trip to AutoZone, a quick universal part, popped it in there, and this thing ran. Now we'll move on to the two biggest issues I've had with this car. And back in the day, these were like what SUVs are now. People didn't really buy them to do anything with them. They were just a regular back and forth commuting cars. So this car, I'm assuming for most of its life that it was down in Florida, never really went into 4-low. And that's understandable, but when I got it, that's the first thing I want to do. So I went to pop it into 4-low, and the transfer case just wouldn't budge. This is a pretty common issue with these, and it's basically just seized inside the transfer case. So it's nothing you can do with the linkage or anything like that to fix it. You actually have to just buy a new transfer case, unless you want to pop it open and rebuild it, which doesn't make any sense because a new transfer case for one of these is like 75 bucks. These are a complete pain in the ass to replace. There's so much stuff under there that needs to get moved. I probably would have been better off just pulling the transmission and having a lot of access in there, but I tried to just do the transfer case, and that was probably not the right move. That was one of the hardest things I've done on a car. So I really pray that you don't ever have to do anything like that, but it is definitely a common issue. The other issue I had with this car is not the most common thing in the world. I had a complete and total flex plate failure. This thing is straight up in multiple pieces, and somehow when I first bought the car, it was perfectly fine, but after a couple weeks of driving, I started noticing pinging and kind of like a rattling noise only when in park. Other than that, it drove perfectly fine. I kind of came to the conclusion that it was this flex plate, but it was still running, so I didn't really care. And I put probably 2,000-3,000 miles on with the flex plate in this condition, and I even towed with it. I have no clue how the car kept it together. I'm assuming that this was just a full crack, obviously separated, but it fits so well together that just the friction from it turning could grab onto any of those little like cuts inside here and keep it together. One of the most mind-blowing things I've ever seen. When I pulled it out, I really expected to just see a crack or something like that, not completely separated flex plate. This goes to the crank, this goes to the torque converter, so there was literally nothing in between the two things. Like, the engine was completely disconnected from the transmission, but the car still ran. I don't get it. One of the biggest talked about issues on the entire Discovery is actually the cylinder liners. So inside the engine, the liners are glued into place, and when you overheat the car, that glue separates and the liners slip and they kind of bounce around, make some slapping noise, and can end up being a lot worse than that in the long run. What the actual problem ends up being is this 3-piece plastic thermostat right here tends to go bad quite often. I don't know if it's the original equipment, but the aftermarket ones do a pretty good job, and as long as you're on top of it and you replace that, the car never really overheats and you don't have to worry about it one bit. I did have a brief period of time where my thermostat did go bad. My car overheated quite a bit, and they're pretty stout because it didn't go. I feel like all these people that are having their engines blow or the cylinder liners slip on these really let them overheat quite a bit, because I had it pretty hot and nothing happened, and I've put on probably 40,000 miles since then. So these manifolds down here are actually somewhat known to crack. I don't know what it is, cheap casting, something like that, high stress, but a lot of times you get a crack here or here, and it's never going to leave you anywhere, but it's going to make that kind of puffing exhaust noise. But look how easy it is to get to. I mean, I can put my whole arm, probably my whole shoulder in here to replace these. Probably my least favorite thing that goes common with these cars is the coil packs like to fail. I'm going to try to fish this down here and show you where they live. It's back behind this. You still can't even see it. But that little shield right there, that is part of the coil packs. You can get to them by fishing your hand in through here, but I have no idea why they put them there. Those commonly go wrong, so when you replace those, make sure to buy a good one so you never have to do it again. On my car, the O2 sensors have actually failed twice. I think it's because I didn't buy the right part. These cars like a very, very specific oxygen sensor. I'm not sure why, but if you put something else in there, it's going to go pretty quickly. All it's going to do is make it kind of run a little bogged down, maybe over fuel, but it's not going to be the biggest issue in the world, but it's something that happens commonly. Now time to look at this thing right here. This is the ABS unit. This goes all the time. There are some simple fixes and countless write-ups on how to fix this, but if you own one of these, expect to have an issue with the ABS at some point. Another issue relating to the ABS is the wheel speed sensors tend to have some issues. I still have issues with mine, and that's the reason I have the common or notorious Three Amigos lights on my car. Unfortunately, that light is very, very common, but usually it's not related to wheel speed sensors. It's related to this ABS up here. But the reason that that's happening in my car is the ball joints are also a decent issue in these. And because of that, I had to pull the wheel speed sensors off. I thought maybe I'll replace them since I'm in there, but that was probably the wrong decision because the replacement part didn't even work as good as the OEM one. So now I have that light on. The speedometer doesn't work, but that's about the farthest that problem goes. And we're only using that to tow boats and jet skis a couple miles every year and then going off-roading in the local trails. That really doesn't matter to me. Motor mounts are also a decent issue. This jostles around a lot. It's a heavy motor, so of course that's going to happen. These intakes like to crack. You can see a piece of tape covering a pinhole and then some glue back here. That's pretty normal, but as long as you get that sealed up, it's going to keep going. Now if we move inside, we'll talk about a couple things in here. One of them is that these windows like to go. The window regulator has some pretty thin metal on it, so sometimes it binds up and then it gets stuck. That's happened to this window over here. It's happened to this window over here. The lock cylinder has also had quite a few issues. Whenever I start it later on, you'll notice me really trying to jam this key in here. It will go every time, but it's kind of a little bit of pain, maybe a little bit of wiggling, a little bit of pushing, and you'll finally get this thing to turn over. As we look up this way, you'll notice the headliner is a little bit wrinkled and there's kind of a little bit of a water spot. This didn't have the sunroof, which makes it a desirable spec. That's because those usually leak. That doesn't mean this doesn't leak anywhere else. That means it just leaks up here along the windshield. I have put some sealant on there to try to stop it, which it actually has, but I'm sure that's going to come back eventually. Another problem with these is that if you let them sit for a while and you start it up and the battery voltage is low, obviously your alternator is going to bring that back up eventually, but in the meantime, the car won't let you shift out of third gear. I'm not sure what it is. I think you might need a higher voltage to be able to be sent to the solenoid down there on the transmission, but whenever you start it up like that, you get a battery light on, you put it into drive down here, and you'll get flashing M and S light. Very common. All you have to do is just let the car kind of charge its battery and it'll start shifting back into gear. You can still drive it, it'll just only drive in third gear and you lose every bit of torque you'll ever want in one of these. Probably the scariest moment I've ever had in this car is under this manual right here. If I flip this carpet up, I don't know if you can see it too much, but the carpet is a little gooey right there and a little crusty because the exhaust under here actually got heated up quite a bit. I think when I had the O2 issues, it was running extremely lean, and I believe it's a cat right there, got super hot and melted the carpet and almost started a fire. There's smoke all throughout this whole thing, so I guess if you don't want your car to catch on fire, make sure your oxygen sensors are good. As we move on down below, up here in between these two exhaust pipes, there is a two-piece front drive shaft that moves from the transfer case to the front axle. These are known to explode. Unfortunately, mine has. Sometimes they'll flop around and it can actually crack the case of your transmission when it happens. Luckily, mine just exploded and fell on the ground, and then I just had a two-wheel drive car for a while. I should also mention that yes, the engine did come out of this car a couple years ago. Now, that happened when the flex plate broke. Instead of just pulling the transmission, which would have been the easy thing to do, I decided to pull the whole motor to refresh it, give it some new head gaskets, and just make sure everything will be good for a while. That shouldn't really give it a knock on the reliability scale. I just kind of decided to do that to be a little bit more thorough. But overall, these trucks can get pretty much anything done. They're great off-roaders, they're great daily drivers, they have great visibility, they're super comfortable. You don't just have to use them for the things I use them for. If you find a clean model, they make great cars just as your daily driver. But long story short, I don't think anybody should be afraid of these. Yes, mine is broken quite a few times, but a lot of it's due to stuff that I've done to it, and as you can see from what I've pointed out, when they do break, they just keep going. Alright, that wraps up everything we have for today on this truck. Be sure to like and subscribe. I know my YouTube channel is pretty small comparatively, but I have tons of weird cars that have a lot of things wrong with them, and we're going to go into a deep dive on fixing pretty much all those things in some future videos, so that should be interesting. Alright, see ya. I might have to stop to drink a little bit more of my coffee. It's so rough, it's fucking going everywhere. Oh my god. Yeah. We're taking some more of that down.